tragedy in Texas.
There are 3 victims who were killed, and then the shooter was killed.
Reopening fresh wounds for the military community at Fort Hood, what the Army is doing today to try to make sense of it all. Healing after genocide. We talk with Catholic Relief Services about the situation in Rwanda as we approach the 20th anniversary of the massacre there.
Her Majesty, His Holiness. I'm Alan Holdren in Rome with what you need to know about Pope Francis' visit from Queen Elizabeth.
And Catholic culture meets big business, the companies that give you options during your Lenten journey. Those stories and much more just ahead on EWTN News Nightly for this Thursday, April 3rd, 2014. Good evening. I'm Brian Patrick with our EWTN News Nightly team. As we look at news now, the thoughts and prayers of the nation are once again focused on Fort Hood, Texas tonight. Let's show you exactly where that Texas town is. Army investigators are trying to determine why one of their own soldiers opened fire. Meanwhile, military leaders here in Washington are trying to figure out if that shooting could have been prevented. Our Wyatt Spencer is at the Pentagon this evening. Wyatt, what have you learned there?
Brian, senior leaders here at the Pentagon still have a lot of questions about the motive behind Wednesday's shooting, which has left 4 dead, 16 injured. One of the big red flags here is that the gunman who had served in the Iraq War in a non-combative role was being treated for mental illness. And today, members of the military expressed their sense of shock as well as sadness.
We talk a lot in the Army that we have an Army family. I understand the resilience of that community, the resilience of the people there, how proud the soldiers are of what they do. And we will do everything we can to ensure they continue to move forward.
General Raymond Odierno expressing his feelings on the shooting at today's Senate Armed Services meeting. Many are still trying to make sense of Wednesday's tragedy. The Fort Hood military post was on lockdown for hours after the shooting started around 5 p.m. Investigators say the suspect is Specialist Ivan Lopez, an Iraq war veteran. Lopez apparently walked into a building and began firing a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He continued into another building before eventually turning the gun on himself after a confrontation with a military police officer in a parking lot.
He was undergoing a variety of treatment and diagnoses for mental health conditions ranging from depression to anxiety to some sleep disturbance.
Army Secretary John McHugh says the suspect has no known connection to extremist groups, but it's an issue that's being carefully looked at. Meanwhile, victims of the shooting are being treated with a variety of injuries, including gunshot wounds.
Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with the entire community, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that the community at Fort Hood has what it needs to deal with the current situation. Any shooting is troubling. Obviously, this reopens the pain of what happened at Fort Hood 5 years ago.
13 people were killed and more than 30 others were wounded after Major Nadal Hassan, an Army psychiatrist, opened fire on the same military post in 2009. Hassan was sentenced to death last year. 2 major mass shootings in 5 years.
Army Secretary McHugh says the suspect had served in the Puerto Rican National Guard before joining the U.S. Army. Earlier today, investigators were searching his home looking for clues. At this point, investigators say that post-traumatic stress disorder could be a factor, but at this point, Brian, when it comes to the shooting, the motive is still under investigation.
All right, our Wyatt Spencer at the Pentagon tonight. So twice in 5 years, this terrible violence has rocked this Texas Army base and the military in general. Monsignor Stephen Rossetti is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and a licensed psychologist. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances.
Well, Brian, it's a real tragedy. And as you said, I spent a number of years in the U.S. military. And then the people in uniform are wonderful people, our men and women. And our hearts go out to the people there. It's just a terrible tragedy.
As a psychologist, are there any warning signs leading up to something like this?
Typically, there are some, but psychology is really poor at predicting future behavior. So we might be able to see some kinds of, he gets upset, he's starting to lose it, he shows signs of irritation, but you're never quite sure, and you never really know. And especially if they have no history of violence in the past.
Yeah, Wyatt mentioned PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not uncommon for soldiers to experience this, but They say he didn't really experience war firsthand. I guess it's really too early to start talking about that.
Well, we don't know if he had PTSD or not, but he wasn't directly in the line of fire. But people can develop PTSD for a variety of reasons, so not just necessarily being shot at. But he was in a combat area, a combat zone in Iraq, and perhaps, we don't know, but perhaps he brought some childhood trauma with him or some psychological deficits. So combine all those and it's possible.
So in your speaking across the country in your work here at Catholic University of America, you talk about priests, you deal with priests in areas of sexuality, leadership, integrity. These are issues, or these are characteristics that are very important in the military too, aren't they?
I just got back from the Air Force Academy a couple weeks ago, and the cadets there have a wonderful program called the National Character and Leadership Symposium. And there I spoke to him about integrity, about leadership, honesty, and the military is trying to promote that among its soldiers and airmen and airwomen. They try to talk about living a life of integrity and honesty.
So what advice might you give to the military leaders right now who are trying to make some kind of sense out of this situation, or at least figure out, you know, where to go from here?
Well, I think first of all, to recognize the situation, when you take a bunch of young people, a whole bunch of 20, 21-year-olds, and place them in combat zones where people are, frankly, they're killing each other, you're going to have a lot of trauma. And I think we recognize that, but still, when you've got thousands of people coming back from war zones, who they're going to be, many of them going to be traumatized. Some will deal with it well, but some will deal with it badly. And I know the military is trying to put more and more resources in terms of helping them, the VA and whatever, but the need is enormous.
And the military is unique in the sense that these men and women are really trained, in many cases, to deal with violence. But expecting it from your own family, that's a whole different issue, isn't it?
Well, it's just incomprehensible. And they said the man was suffering from some anxiety and some depression. Fine. I mean, lots of people suffer from anxiety and depression. But how you get from anxiety and depression to a murderous rampage, I mean, it's unbelievable. The psychiatrist was quoted as saying he saw no real signs of imminent violent behavior. So something happened. Something happened to push him from being anxious and depressed to being violent. And right now we don't know what that is.
So how would you suggest that we look at this and maybe discuss it versus trying to figure it all out and come up with answers that we probably never come up with anyway?
Well, I think it's frightening for people. We talked about the Malaysian flight going down and how frightening it is to think you could get on an airplane and be lost in the Indian Ocean, to think you could be on a military base and being shot by one of your own soldiers. So life is not so secure as we think it is, and the human psyche is more frail, and there's just more and more risk, if you will, to life than we would like to admit. It's a dangerous world, frankly.
Well, thank you for your analysis on this, Monsignor Stephen Rossetti.
You're welcome, Brian.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II pays a private visit to Pope Francis today at the Vatican. We go to our Rome correspondent, Alan Holdren, who has that story. Alan, tell us about the Queen's papal pilgrimage today.
It was the 5th time the Queen visited the Vatican since 1951. The first since the year 2000, when she came to see John Paul II. Today's was an informal visit. It was without the usual ceremony, and it was the first time the Queen and her husband had met Pope Francis. A warm welcome to the Vatican. Informal greetings. A papal welcome in a private study in the Pope's audience hall. Queen Elizabeth and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, in the Vatican. They speak with the help of an interpreter. Gifts are exchanged. A food basket from the monarchs, including items like whiskey from their Scottish summer residence and honey from the bees of Buckingham Palace. From the Pope, a copy of the document that added St. Edward's feast to the liturgical calendar, and even a gift for the newborn Prince George of Cambridge. It's short and light, with a host happy to accompany his guests to the door. Now, Brian, it needs to be said that this wasn't an official state visit. It was just an informal visit, so it didn't have all the regalia and fanfare that something like President Obama's visit had last week. They didn't take anything away from it. You could see that they had a great time. They joked around. It was a great first visit for the two.
And thank you for sharing that with us, Alan Holdren, our Rome correspondent. We're joined now in our D.C. studio by Monsignor Andrew Wadsworth, a priest with the Archdiocese of Westminster in the United Kingdom, currently based here in Washington. It seems like that meeting today went very well. How do you think?
I think so. I think it's an indication of a growing closeness between the Holy See and the British monarchy that's really extended throughout the 6 decades of Queen Elizabeth's reign.
So let's go back, though, to Henry VIII. He pulled away from the Catholic Church, began the Church of England, and then the Pope later removed the title from the Queen of England. How can this all be, it seems to have pretty much dissipated?
Well, that's true. It was Henry VIII's daughter, Elizabeth I, who was excommunicated, which essentially broke the link of communion between the Church in England and the Church of Rome. But from the time of Edward VII, so the present Queen's great-grandfather, 1903, his visit to Pope Leo XIII. From that time to the present day, there's been a growing closeness, I would say, between the monarchy and the Holy See. So this present Queen has met every pope since Pius XII, with the exception of Pope John Paul I. When she met Pius XII, she was not yet Queen, but in her own lifetime she's met and also formally met and welcomed every pope.
Now, isn't the Queen in the UK really the symbolic head, at least, of the Church of England?
She's the supreme governor of the Church of England, which is the historic community that began really the Anglican Communion. So it's the Episcopalian Church, the Anglican Church in England, from which the worldwide Anglican Communion has its origin.
This was her first meeting with Pope Francis, but she did meet with John Paul II and Pope Benedict. How was her relationship with these two pontiffs?
Very warm, I would say. She met Pope John Paul II 3 times, twice in Rome and once welcomed him to England in 1982. And there seems to have been a very great closeness between them. And that was also evident, I think, in the meeting with Pope Benedict when she welcomed him to Edinburgh in his momentous tour of England and Scotland in 2011.
It's interesting, there seems to be good relations now between the Church of England and the Catholic Church, and yet in England, someone who is Catholic cannot be a monarch. Isn't there a law against that, actually?
There still is, and perhaps that is in relation to the fact that the monarch must be the supreme governor of the state church, the established church, which is the Church of England. Although only a year ago, the Queen repealed the law which prevented heirs to the throne marrying a Catholic. So in one sense, there has been a slight relaxation in relation to that.
When Pope Benedict visited the UK before his resignation, I'm sure that did a lot to sort of smooth the relationship between these two, the Church and the Church of England as well.
Oh, I think so. And it's not without significance that Pope Benedict's own tremendous commitment to seeking unity, particularly with Anglicans, was perhaps in its highest expression, both in his meeting with the Queen and, of course, in his whole project of Anglicanorum Cetibus, which was to welcome members of the Anglican Church who sought communion with Rome.
Yeah, that was certainly an interesting development under Pope Benedict. So just to summarize today's meetings, the meeting between Pope Francis and Queen Elizabeth, do you see that as just a formality, or is there any more significance here?
Oh no, I think it must be seen as significant, although technically a private meeting, and neither the Holy See nor Buckingham Palace have released any report as to the content of the discussion. I think it's something we can be very pleased about, and certainly Catholics in England, I'm sure, will be delighted at today's development.
All right. Monsignor Wadsworth, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right. And the Queen has a birthday coming up. She turns 88, April 21st, and has been Queen for more than 60 years now. All of Britain celebrated her Diamond Jubilee in 2012 with a year full of events. A highlight was this flotilla on the River Thames. More than 1,000 boats paid tribute to the Queen, and her subjects lined the banks, cheering and waving British flags. It was a national outpouring of affection for a beloved monarch. Passengers aboard a Delta jet made it to their destination, but arrived at an airport across town. Flight 886 from Atlanta had a problem with its hydraulic system. The plane landed at New York's JFK Airport instead of LaGuardia. The plane skidded off the runway, but everyone was able to get off the plane safely. The airline provided buses to LaGuardia. The FAA is investigating tonight. The death toll is rising in Washington state. We've told you about that massive mudslide there last month. We now know 30 people have died. At least 17 are still missing. Coming up, a secret plot exposed. We'll tell you about what the U.S. was doing to win over the minds of Cubans. Plus, it's fast food, literally. What restaurants are doing to cater to Catholics this Lent. Welcome back to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and the Senate Intelligence Committee takes on torture. The committee, led by Senator Dianne Feinstein, met in secret session today. It declassified a 480-page report summarizing the government's so-called enhanced interrogation techniques for suspected terrorists. American bishops were pushing for the move, saying torture is an intrinsic evil. It was 20 years ago this month, a dark chapter in Rwanda's history began. More than a 3-month period, the UN estimates 800,000 men, women, and children were brutally murdered in the Rwandan genocide. Today in Rome, Pope Francis met with bishops from Rwanda, the Holy Father saying he joins them in their mourning and prays for the victims of the genocide, their families, and all Rwandans. He also said reconciliation and the healing of wounds remain the priority of the Church in Rwanda. Pope Francis also spoke of the crucial role of the laity in rebuilding the country, saying the bishops should focus on training and support of lay people. EWTN News Nightly talked by phone with the Catholic Relief Services worker involved in that training in Rwanda. Her outlook for the country's future is hopeful.
It's difficult to imagine how it was 20 years ago because the population was really so much affected. But now there is so many good examples of people living together after a healing and reconciliation process they went through.
Catholic Relief Services has been in Rwanda for more than 50 years. We'll have more on the Rwanda genocide next week as that country's mourning period begins. Well, you might think the fight against communist forces has been over for decades, but a new investigation reveals the U.S. is still battling Cuba in a more subtle way. EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi has the report from the headquarters of the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Brian, this evening we know that USAID was behind a popular former social network in Cuba, similar to Twitter. Its appearance and then sudden disappearance were mysterious, until now.
I was on the service for so long and never realized what it really was.
Ernesto Guara was one of 10,000 members of the former Cuban social network called Zunzaneo. He got around Cuba's internet restrictions by using text messaging. An AP investigation now finds USAID set up the network to organize political demonstrations against that country's communist government. The plan began when a USAID contractor obtained 500,000 Cuban cell phone numbers. Starting in 2009, messages went out in the weeks leading up to a big concert in Havana. Topics included the weather, soccer, and music. But one USAID document said the aim was to renegotiate the balance of power between the state and society. They never did send out those messages sparking dissent. The AP obtained this memo saying there will be absolutely no mention of United States government involvement. Former CIA analyst Fulton Armstrong was working for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time.
We were told we couldn't even be told in broad terms what was happening because, quote, people will die.
But today the White House said this work wasn't a covert operation.
It was debated in Congress. It was reviewed by the GAO. Those kinds of things don't happen to covert programs.
A USAID statement says it's proud of its work in Cuba to provide basic humanitarian assistance, promote human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to help information flow more freely to the Cuban people.
The social network suddenly stopped in 2012 when USAID says funding stopped. Reporting here at USAID headquarters, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, also, Jason, we should add the White House and USAID both made similar statements today saying the program was discreet to protect their partners on the ground. Well, speaking of Twitter, you will soon be able to use it again in the country of Turkey. It was banned in that country 2 weeks ago, but a court recently ruled that the ban violated the rights of people to free expression. Despite the ruling, leaders in Turkey have still banned YouTube. Well, there is brand new research tonight from Pew on seniors and technology. 60% of seniors now use the internet and about 3 in 10 are on social networks like Facebook. Their cell phone use is also up now to more than 75%, and internet use by seniors is more common among those who are healthy, wealthy, and wise, so to speak. The survey says physical health, income, and education factor in tech use, and once seniors join the digital world, they use the internet daily, so it becomes an integral part of their life. But for those who are not online, about half say they don't think they're missing out on much. Up next, powerful aftershocks rock Chile a day after an earthquake strikes that country. We have an update tonight. And looking for some meatless options for Fridays in Lent? We'll give you plenty of ideas from the world of fast food. On this Thursday, April 3rd, you're watching EWTN News Nightly. Damage is minimal from the aftershocks that continue to be felt in northern Chile. On Tuesday, an 8.2 magnitude earthquake damaged several thousand homes and caused 6 deaths. Power is still out in many areas, and the military is helping police keep order. One strong aftershock prompted a tsunami alert overnight. People living in low-lying areas along the coastline were told to move inland. Chile's President Michelle Bachelet was out assessing damage from the quake, and she had to move to higher ground until the tsunami alert was canceled. A painting worth millions of dollars turns up in an unlikely place after it was stolen more than 40 years ago. Susie Pinto tells us more.
Italian police say a Gauguin still life that was stolen from a private collection in Britain in 1970 and hung in a Sicilian auto worker's kitchen for 40 years has now been recovered. The man claims he displayed it on his kitchen wall because the painting depicting 2 bowls of fruit seemed a suitable backdrop to his dinner table. Police say the man bought the painting, along with one by Pierre Bonnard, at an auction of unclaimed lost items for the equivalent of about $100. The auctioneers apparently didn't know they were stolen. Police estimate the painting is worth between $14 and $41 million. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, Susie, thank you. We call it March Madness, but it all comes down to the first weekend of April. You'll find no upstarts or Cinderella teams in the Final Four this coming weekend in North Texas, only the big boys. Kentucky and Connecticut are 2 power programs with storied histories, including recent championships. Florida, the top overall seed, has played like it by extending its winning streak to 30 games. And the Wisconsin Badgers are feisty, fundamentally sound, and one of those teams opponents just hate to play. Florida plays UConn Saturday evening. It's Wisconsin and Kentucky Sunday night. The championship game is Monday night in Arlington, Texas. Tomorrow marks the 5th Friday of Lent, and when mealtime rolls around, many Catholics will eat fish. Our Mark Irons takes a look at a seasonal trend that's happening in the fast food world.
Lent is a time of fasting. It's also a time of
buy one, get one fish fillet sandwiches.
Fast food?
Thanks for choosing McDonald's. How can I help you?
Yeah, I was curious, what's the deal with these fish sandwiches?
They're buy one, get one free.
Buy one, get one free, really? The fast food giant is offering this special for a limited time. Coincidence?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Why are you guys doing this special now?
I'm really not sure. Maybe McDonald's just in a good mood to give away free fish fillet.
Maybe, but at nearby Catholic University, this business major thinks it's something else.
With as many Catholics there are in the country, I think it's a very special and unique business tactic.
Cheers to Friday.
Yes.
The Filet-O-Fish was actually invented by a McDonald's restaurant owner in the 60s. He was trying to meet the needs of his largely Catholic community. But not everyone is a fan of the sandwich.
Are you Catholic? It's the Lenten season.
I'm gluten-free.
Gluten-free, all right.
Many fast food restaurants offer fish specials or fish options that seem to come to shore for the Lenten season and then head back to sea when it's over. Chick-fil-A is the home of the original chicken sandwich. It's a place that tells us to eat more chicken. But a Chick-fil-A spokesperson told EWTN News Nightly the restaurant would offer fish sandwiches through April 18th and cited religious purposes among the reasons for the special. If you find yourself rolling through the drive-thru this Lent, remember, the meat can wait. Could I do buy 2, get 2 free?
Sure, you sure can.
Excellent. But keep in mind the point is to fast. Thank you very much. And maybe giving up fast food isn't a bad idea either.
Free fish! Free fish?
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Just one of Mark's many fish stories. Well, thank you for spending time with us tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We leave you tonight with our tribute from our EWTN News Nightly team that they put together in honor of the victims of the Fort Hood tragedy. Good night and God bless.
In paradisum dedukante angeli.
It's a terrible tragedy. We know that. We know there are casualties, both people killed and injured.
Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with the entire community, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that the community at Fort Hood has what it needs to deal with the current situation.